Hey guys, welcome back to Common Mansplaining. This is Eddie. This is Christian. Today we're going to answer a question that was brought to our attention by one of our esteemed followers, and we're going to be talking about the moral decay of society.
We got a comment asking us for more clarification on our positions, or my position, my opinions about public morality. Maybe to define it a little more and why I'm concerned about a decline in public morality. Is that
Okay.
fair?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And then I think related to, right, so public morality is something that is important when you come together to live in cities and have where you have to interact with each other, right? If you're gonna be a hermit and live out in the Northwest Territories in an igloo and never talk to another human being, you can create your own moral universe and um, you know and make peace with that yourself. But when we live together, there are certain things we have to do, especially to and your decisions start impacting uh, other people's lives around you. It's one of the things like certain crimes aren't just, especially violent crimes or um, certain sexual crimes, aren't just a crime against one individual against another. They're actually antisocial crimes because they make everybody more afraid. They have the ripples. They change how people interact with. Now all of a sudden people aren't free to go out and do things. They have to be escorted or they need to go. They're afraid to be around each other, and those have very real impacts on our prosperity, our trust, and what kind of activities people will do, and how entertainment and business and commerce gets done. So that's why, in some degree, why to justify sort of harsher penalties for those type of antisocial crimes, because it's not just when like I steal your phone, back from you, but if I harm you in a way that would make people more afraid to go outside their homes or go shopping or go to do something entertaining like go to an amusement park or something like that.
Okay. Well,
Right.
so when I hear the words moral decay,
Uh-huh.
most of the time, the people that are making this complaint usually aren't necessarily talking about crimes. They're
Right.
usually talking about non-criminal antisocial behavior, like things like sexual deviance or like so.
And it leads to that as well. So in the same way, right, that people they now start acting outside of norms, um, but it's rather than so I would say a religious um, morality, which usually has to do with sexual deviancy or sexual integrity,
or degradation of
degradation, family values, things like that. But it's being responsible, right? So the bedrock of uh, our public morality is the morality that perpetuates that, so that our civilization can continue, right? To have children, and we need boring, stable families to have children, to support them, to raise them, to be competent so that they can succeed on their own in society. And those are sort of the sheep that stand in the field.
Yes.
Right. And there are going to be people who wander off from the flock.
Right.
Right.
Like
The antisocial part, right? People that are right, and some cultures, things like that. And generally, when society is strong enough, you can tolerate that we can still continue to exist and thrive
a few of them.
in spite of that. But there becomes a critical sort of tipping point where so many people are rejecting the lifestyle of the foundation of society, right? That right, all the sheep are now, instead of staying where the shepherd has led them and eating the grass in the field, are wandering off into
Right.
fields where the shepherd can't get them all, and it all kind of starts to break down, and it's like, well, why do we even have these sheep anyway? So,
I mean, cows are so much.
Yeah,
They
cows
don't
are so
move
much
very
easier.
fast. Well, let me ask. So, Vance has been criticized recently about his joke, "Childless cat ladies are running the nation," and of course, it was a humor.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't intended to offend, but
Yeah.
at the time, he did kind of make it a snarky, snarky comment. But here's my biggest question right now. It's one thing to say, the bulk of society ought to do X.
Yes.
But it's another thing to legislate that the bulk of society
Well,
ought
that's
to
true.
do X.
Right. And so there's another aspect of declare of public morality. So when you no longer feel like you're part of, that you're participating, right? You've sort of dropped out. You're in the subculture, and you're rejecting society wants to encourage you to have your own family, right? And to be a stable person. When you reject that, how do I put this? What's on the tip of my tongue? Let's see. No, hold on. I mean, so it's their rejection of that also is sort of a break between your integrity and our social contract with our fellow man. And I think right now is what
So
is
again,
more
it's a break between.
our sort of social contract with our fellow man.
Okay.
And what that's led to is a breakdown of trust. I think this is a theory of mine. I think largely when people think of the good old days or back when things were better, we know in the past there was, you're looking at it through rose-colored glasses, there was still a lot of flaws in the past. But a time when people's word was respected, you could make a contract that, and an expectation that there was this honesty. If I told you I was going to sell you something,
Right.
I would deliver what I told you I was going to sell you, and you would then pay me what you agreed to pay me. Right?
Otherwise, you go out of business.
Right. Well, it's that sort of social trust, and then otherwise, now we're so worried about being scammed.
Sure.
Right. If I send you something, it's like, well, I don't want to pay you because this could be bad, and I'm like, well, I don't want to send him something then if he's not going to pay me.
Right. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, right, everybody's so suspicious. Like the first reaction when you meet someone is this person a scammer? Is he trying to get one over on me?
Yeah, I think the internet did that.
And if he tells you, if you have somebody that agrees, I'm going to do this, that word is wind.
Right.
Right. If he, what Mary Poppins calls a pie crust promise, easily made, easily broken.
Right.
That there's not a word, and that's right. Right. Living up to our commitments, the things that we say to our fellow men, don't mean anything anymore unless we're compelled by legal action. We become litigious. We have to hire lawyers and things like that. And that's what Sotius we think of now. Of right, and lawyers or going to the courtroom is the nuclear option of social interactions of a social contract.
Okay.
Right. If you sue someone, you essentially drop a nuclear bomb on that relationship.
Sure.
Right. And but that's what people feel like they have to do and have to go to, because this large moral decay of I'll find my own truth. I can reject. I don't need to do or feel responsible for society. In fact, people that try to uphold and try to be responsible are just sheep. They're being led. They're naive. They're not choosing to do that. Right. They're not awoke. They haven't awoken themselves.
Yeah,
right?
They're
not woke.
Well, so my
really
I guess to push back a little bit,
sure.
my question still sort of stands, and that is, I mean, I'm kind of.
Sure.
I just realized I'm with the audio equipment. I'm kind of libertarian when it comes to a lot of ideas, a lot of legislation, right? And it's one thing to say yes, most people should live in family, full family, nuclear
units.
family units.
Uh-huh.
But it's another thing to say they must.
All right. Yeah.
Right? So how do you make that transition from
Sure.
from most of us should do X
Uh-huh.
to most of us must do X, or there are legal incentives to do X, or there are, because if you get to that level, then I start shrinking away, because then I'm like, ooh, now you're pushing into my personal liberties.
Okay, that's an excellent question, and those lines do need to be respected, but it is incentives, right? That you either with tax, so you subsidize behavior that doesn't happen enough.
Okay.
Right, and you tax behavior that's happening too much, right? This is old school economic theory. Like if there were 1,000 coal-fired power plants in town because everybody could make money burning coal to make electricity, but it has negative impacts, so you tax that, so you have fewer of them. But if it's a classic,
but then
say not enough people want to have nuclear families, so you make tax incentives, right? And you do certain things to reward or legitimize that. Sometimes they're just ceremonial, or sometimes they don't really even have any real worth. They're just sort of prestige or certain honorariums,
right,
given to the people, and it's a recognition. You're the backbone, the strength of our society that's allowing us to pass on to the next generation.
Right.
Right, and we've seen in countries, right, where they haven't done this, where they've even taken away sort of even the non-monetary or tax incentives, that families, birth rates, things are just collapsing, dropping to the floor. Nobody feels any.
And ours is currently on the verge of demographic collapse as well. Like we're probably going to start declining. Well, if it wasn't for immigration,
right,
we would start collapsing. But my big question though is that here again, if you're talking about incentives, if you're looking at, if I'm staring down the barrel of a governmental tax program, right, and it's like I either do X or they're going to take money from me, or I get money for doing Y. Either way, I'm looking at a system that is inherently modifying my right to pursue property to ensure, like it's a principled objection.
If they taxed you less because you had a family, right? You had children. Like tax credits for children is a way of saying, we want more of this, and it used to be and so yes, there are some people who want children, like the childless cat ladies or something, want a family, but are denied that because, right, we don't have arranged marriages largely in this country. We don't have forced families. People have to mutually agree to come together, and then there are other things, unimperative, and so we can tolerate that. It's we're strong enough that if individuals are unable to have that doesn't break down our society. That's not the breakdown.
Are you sure?
It's the promotion. Yeah, I'm sure on that.
How much?
Yeah, so I think like the childless cat ladies aren't the problem necessarily so much as really like the Pride Week, the act of promoting and giving prestige and celebration of a non-traditional, really a subculture that eschews perpetuating the next generation. They even disdain and look down on people that have families as they call them breeders or things like that.
Some do, some don't. Yeah,
some don't.
But either way, it's like even I don't really even know what it means to be a quote unquote childless cat lady. But that's like, again, like it was supposed to be a joke. But
yeah.
But let's say we're talking about the group of women who choose to promote their own career, for example, instead of their family life, or something like that.
Sure.
Like they choose to spend time with a different endeavor. Any one of those is never a problem. Any two of those or five of those is never a problem. The problem I would foresee is when it gets to the point where, you know, that starts making up 20, 30, 50% of the women in the pool, then it's like, whoa, now we don't have any families anymore.
Not even just that. Organically is when the pressure starts to switch from, okay, you know, if this is what these women have freely chosen,
right,
to where they then start looking down upon women that choose to have families. Right? Or looking down, or the government incentives actually punish or make it harder for women to choose not to work and to have families, right? When that's a important thing that needs to be, or when somebody says we want to reward with taxes or with even non-monetary um, recognition about certain individuals that choose to have families and make those sacrifices. They're very real sacrifices they're giving up. Yes, and the public morality, maybe we can get into some of the disturbing stories about Puff Daddy or P. Diddy.
Oh boy.
But public morality is not even just allowing that some people are going to be lascivious or promiscuous or you know, or debase themselves, but it's even promoting that and celebrating that and encouraging that activity so that it happens more. Right? Like, there's always going to be some element that does that. It normally doesn't need encouragement. And so when you go to such a point where you encourage that behavior, you reward it, it's going to happen more often than it would before. And that's what, or you tell them that it's not a problem. It's not bad for our society to live this way, to just, you know, to be lascivious and have to delay marriage and just have promiscuous hookups, and to look down upon the young people that get married in their 20s and start having a family, right? When and that's the sort of declining moral thing that, rather than celebrating, like my son who got married at 22, wants to have a family of his own, how that would be mocked.
Right.
When that's really just a bedrock, and you should be like celebrating that my son is doing that, because those things are essentially giving us the strength so that people can be irresponsible.
Right, that's the foundation of the just like having doctors and having teachers, right?
Yeah.
Having family, to me, is just as basic. But I do see there's this tension, because on the one side you've got this group that already feels alienated, right? And
which group?
Like you pick one, like let's say homosexuals, let's say transgender, let's say, you know, any one of them.
But feeling alienated.
You have a group that feels alienated, and so to attempt to overcompensate, they're all going to like really hammer home how normal their activities are, right? Because they have to, right? And don't get me wrong, I understand.
Do they have to?
Well, have to is not the right word. I understand from their point of view why they would want to do that, right? Because anybody wants to feel normal. Everybody wants to feel like they're part of society. And so they're going to try to do that. Now, I think where it crosses a line is where they try to get me to also celebrate those activities as normal, because my activities are normal, your activities are normal. I don't have anything to do with your activities, and you shouldn't try to encourage me to like try to use yours as an example, right? If I like yours, great, I will, and if I don't, great, I won't. You know, that's my purview, that's my prerogative. But it's not like I don't understand why, for example, that community would want to, right? That makes perfect sense to me. Everybody wants to feel included.
Yeah.
Now, I don't like government putting their thumb on the scale either way. I don't like media putting their thumb on the scale either way, and they do it a lot. And I don't know really how to tackle that second part. Like, government is kind of already supposed to not do that because that's like in the Constitution. But when the media does it, it's scary because there's really no way to stop that. I don't know how to.
Well, the government putting the thumb on it is that they realize it's difficult to have a family, and so they try to have things that subsidize to make mortgages for homeowners, you know, stable people that live in a home in one place and are more stable. and give them incentives like, hey, it's better for you to do this rather than just rent and move around. Have a stable life. We give you tax credits for your children
But now is
to
that,
reward that.
let's say, suppose I am a lady, childless cat lady who's chosen my career, right? That's just nothing immoral about that.
Yeah, nothing.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Maybe not anything actively sacrificial or community serving, but there's nothing like I'm not like going out and performing crimes. I'm not going.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like I'm penalized because you're getting money that I'm not. Is that fair?
Well, right. So it's because if the government recognized the value of passing on, having a family, and passing on the thing is to the next generation, that if they don't do that, they have problems, right? So South Korea right now, very dramatically, is offering tens of thousands of dollars
Oh yeah.
for people to move there
Wow.
and marry a South Korean person and have a family.
Yeah.
Right?
South Korea sounds nice.
North Italy doing the same thing. Scandinavia, especially because the expectations in a lot of these countries are to delay marriage until you've succeeded. Sometimes in your late 30s or your 40s, then you finally get married.
Right.
Maybe have one child or something.
See, that doesn't make any sense to me. The way, no offense, like that.
Yeah,
I see girls do that all the time. They're like, I'm going to focus on me right now, and I'm going to concentrate on my career, and I'll get a relationship later when I'm like 45. I'm like, nobody's going to.
No, but
no offense, but nobody's going to want you when you're like 60.
Even couples, well, the couples, boyfriend and girlfriend, they live together and just choose. Well, we're not, might even be in their early to mid 20s, and say we're going to wait and get married and have children not till we succeeded in our careers and their late 30s as a crowning achievement, things like that. And what it's led to is what you can expect is that fewer and fewer people have families.
Outrageous.
They don't feel like the morality tied to encouraging people to wait to have children and sexual relations until marriage has been encouraged to decay.
Right.
And in a lot of churches as well. And there's no expectation that people should confine their sexual activities to a marriage setting. And so, and say, well, there's no problem with that. People are free, and the government, to a large degree, has to get out of that. They can't make it a crime for people to express for consenting adults how they want to act.
Right.
But it has the consequence that people have fewer families, fewer marriages, or fewer children. And the government, by trying to reward, sometimes it's even with just honorariums, like using the word marriage or different things, or celebrating certain holidays. Maybe it's not even with money.
Right.
We're just trying to say, look, everybody's good. You can do whatever you want. We're the government. We have to be blind to this. But we recognize that marriages that are trying to have children are really important.
Yeah, they're
the bedrock, that they're really valuable. Right. Maybe we'll just say that. But that's become very, very controversial.
Right. Very passive.
And so now, because we're social creatures, I don't want to say social contagion, but when you promote anything, any lifestyle, people will expose to that, and it will happen more often than organically. You would have, there would be some people who would not want to have a family. People who are incapable of having a family or things like that. But by encouraging lifestyles that reject that family, it happens more than it should.
Yeah.
And it leads to instability, and then ultimately moral decay, because then they don't feel like sexuality is sacred, or that family relationships are sacred.
Right.
And especially as there's less religion in the public sphere. I'm not saying the government should be, but the sacredness of these things is recognized, and these are things we have learned over time are important.
Right.
And we're not the first people who've had the idea of, hey, let's be promiscuous.
Right.
And because those societies have declined, and it is sort of a sign of a society in decline when you say homosexual relationships are the equivalent of heterosexual relationships that are trying to have children.
Right.
And you say, and maybe the government shouldn't be in that, but that's sort of to answer us. One of the moral declines I say is that the over encouragement of this, and then
What is your thought on? So, because I did a video on gay marriage a while back and just marriage in general, and one of the things that I mentioned in the video is that I don't like, again, I say I'm libertarian.
Yeah.
So I don't care what a person does with their free time. I don't care what unions they engage in. I don't care. That's none of my business. But marriage has traditionally been a religious institution, not a state-based institution. Now, there were, it's got a long history, right? Like, it started out with it being more of a contract between, not even a contract between husband and wife, more of a contract between father to future owner, because women were kind of like or second-hand citizens. And there was like a dowry paid, and that was kind of like a transfer of ownership. And this is like going way, way back. Like, this is like thousands of years ago. But simultaneously, there was a religious institution that rose up around it, largely around Christianity. And that, the Jewish, Judeo-Christian version of marriage is the one that's basically carried through into the West. Like, if you track that history, that's kind of the one that snaked into the Western culture. And nowadays, yes, we have a state-based marriage, but it's kind of separate from the religious-based marriage, right? Like, you can go down to the courthouse today and get married, right? But that's not the same as, like, having the celebration in the church, having, finding somebody that matches your religion and going through all this religion. Because the major difference is, in a religious-based institution, marriage is a covenant, not a contract. And that's the huge difference that I think we lose when you transfer it over to the state side.
No, I would disagree on a couple points.
Sure.
One, I think absolutely 100% a marriage between is two people and the state.
Really?
Where you're getting a marriage license, and you're
not two people in God.
Well, no, and so when it's a religious marriage, it's two people, God and the state, legally and lawfully. So legally to the state, lawfully to God.
Okay.
Right? You're legally and lawfully married. So you're making those covenants to each other, but it is to the state.
Okay.
And our marriage tradition that we have in the West actually comes more from the Romans, because there was, even the Judea, when you look in the Bible,
that side.
There was plural marriages,
right?
The patriarchs. There was plural marriages in every other culture in the Far East. It was the Romans that had monogamous marriages, and because marriages involve property, right, and ownership of land, estates, different things like that, and so the state was doing this, and then it was kind of who are your, and this marriage now is who are the legal heirs to this property, and that's what the European model has been, is that marriage controls property. Land, which is
so that was
and that's why the state. That's why the state has to bless There's common law marriages, right? It's just people living together, and that's been around for a long time. But when the state official marriages, and the state recognizes that you two can own property together, and that your heirs will inherit it. So and it's recognizing this entity of your family.
So in your mind, is the state utilizing just the generic version of marriage as an incentive? Like, is nothing, like, if you erased all else other than the fact that you can now combine property, and the state signs off on that union of property conjointment, is that an incentive in and of itself, or is that, because I've always thought about it.
Marriages are the greatest institution for building wealth.
But that's not what I mean. So, I guess my point is, this is the difference between a like a marriage between a man and a woman being blessed by the state, and a marriage between, for example, a man and a man being blessed by the state. As far as the state's concerned, I don't see why there would be a difference. I do see why there are differences in religion,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see why there are differences according to the government unless they're trying to incentivize one.
Well, this was the early debate was to call them, say, give them all the same legal protections, but call it a civil union.
Right.
And just allow the honorarium to be for
that's not
for
good enough for that
heterosexuals.
community
Right,
because
yeah.
then they're not going to feel normal.
They
Like
did
we've done
right. So that was California passed that law and it was ruled down.
What was that? Do you know?
That was Prop 8.
When was that?
That was in 2008.
2008.
Right.
Okay.
In 2008, it was passed in California. That
Called a civil union.
No.
Oh, to
Well, so the specifics were in the California Constitution that the word marriage
right.
was reserved for heterosexual
Got it.
marriages, couples. You could give all the same legal
Protections, all the
protections,
same property,
but you had to call it something else.
Okay.
And it was they could call it whatever they wanted. It was at the time the option or the most commonly used vernacular was civil unions, but the word marriage be reserved for that.
Now, real quick,
That
for
was
the,
all Prop
for
8,
the
so.
audience, for anybody out there who, for example, is in one of those alternative family structures, I am kind of curious if you guys have time to put your comments. I want to know what you think about like the wording, how important that is to you. Like, be interested to know if it's important to say the word like "I'm married," or a civil union is just as good, or
My
if it's
partner,
different. Or,
yeah, this is my partner.
I've
this
always
is my
wondered because
companion.
obviously it's never, in my life it's never come up, but I've never seen a real big difference, but that's because
Yes,
I'm
you
not.
can call it spouse, but your ceremony or your license instead of being a marriage license is a civil union license. It was really just that in every way the tax incentives or other things could be the same, and that the government can make no legal distinction between the two, other than just the honorarium of the word
Right.
being reserved for that. So that was considered a bridge too far, and was a big thing that awakened the LGBT political activism that we see today.
Right.
And they are drunk on their political power.
Yeah,
They are heady with the power that they have now, and no. The media used to always cross the line or set the line that homosexual behavior needed to be private and clandestine and not out and about. People needed to be in the closet and that would keep the activity rare and to individuals that was genuinely their only form of sexual attraction. But that as it becomes more widespread, as a social idea, you have more people that participate in the lifestyle
Definitely.
than you did before. They talk about repression or there are different ideas, and psychologists can talk about it, sort of that nature and nurture thing. But the media line, or the non-religious morality line, which was normally defined by journalists and by the media, like this is where we go, this is too far.
Right.
Has when they talk about the slippery slope, has slid down.
Yeah.
Where right now, for a long time, the line has always been, okay, now you can do whatever you want as long as it's consenting adults.
Right.
Children are off limits.
Right.
Right? Anything to do with children, that's where we draw the line.
Right.
But now we're seeing, right, the tension now is they're trying to move that line.
Yeah.
Right? And put children in limits, and people are saying, no. We need to hold to this line. We've let everything slide down,
Right.
and it's reached this line. And if we let this line go, so where are you going to put it next? And the far left, the really far left, says there should be no line, right? That everybody should be able to create their own moral universe.
Yeah.
That children are should be able to consent, and that's the type of public morality where there is no line, right? Where not even institutions like the government, the media, universities, anybody can say that nothing is wrong
Right.
Nothing is too far. Nothing, right? As long as people consent to do it, then it's right.
Yeah, there's this really interesting movement with the postmodern movement, but it's tied into a lot of other things at the same time. Um, this moral relativism is really weird because as I see these self-proclaimed moral relativists, they don't live their life like they are. But if you were to like talk to them philosophically, many of them are just like, it's like almost like morality doesn't exist, that it's just a figment of our subjective, design. But then, like for the most part, most of them live a relatively what I would call, like quote unquote normal life. It's still like these fringes that involve themselves in these really odd, kind of antisocial behaviors. But like I could point to, countless people who like philosophically they're moral relativists, but like their lifestyle is still very Western Judeo-Christian,
Oh yeah,
and I'm wondering how do they how I want for those of you out there who may have this, how do you reconcile those? Because it's a really weird thing to reconcile. Like I don't understand why. Like if you are truly a moral relativist, why not go steal your neighbor's stuff? There's no reason not to do it. Like I just don't. I mean, not that there's a reason to do it, but like it's just
maybe there's stuff something.
Maybe it's just my neighbor's car.
Well, yeah,
this car sucks.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was the joke when they and my sister-in-laws are sort of like this, and people, it's like who have political beliefs that and ideologies that align with the far left, but then live their lives, their personal lives, like somebody from the far right.
Right.
Right. They.
It's like, well, I wouldn't do that.
When
but
everybody else they finish school, they go to college. After college, they get a job. They get married. They wait to have kids until after they're married, right? And they're faithful to their spouses in those marriages. They have more than 2 children, and they invest for their long term, and they buy property like a home and things like that. But advocate that's very leftist. And I've just tried to tell them once, I'm like, you just need to preach what you practice.
Right. Practice what you
right. So it's gone from, because of the power of the left, by controlling the media, that they have got people to be quiet, that they feel afraid to preach what they practice. What they know is where the greatest happiness, the greatest wealth, how great it is to be one of the sheep in the field, right? The shepherd led us to a great field. This grass is great. We don't need to go wandering off and finding some weird type of grass, right? And we need to be here because we're here to eat this grass and fertilize this field or whatever like that, and be safe for the next generation of sheep. And if we go wandering off and get killed or become less productive, then it defeats the whole purpose of, And I'm sorry to lean into the flock so much. It's kind of more of a religious metaphor.
That's a good metaphor. And there used to be, it feels like a lot of people, a lot of sheep in the herd, that didn't wander off. But there were many sheep that were saying, well, it's fine to wander off, right? But they were in the herd.
Yeah.
But now I feel like it's gotten to there's this critical mass built up where so many people have heard the words "it's fine to wander off" that now they actually are at the point where they're all just wandering off.
Well, and the media and the advertisers not just wandering off. They're like, "Hey, I've heard there's some great grass down
not only
there.
is it fine to wander off, the grass is greener on the other side."
And those wolves, they're so interesting to talk to. Those coyotes
wolves actually aren't that big
and
bad.
stuff like It's like you don't need to stay by the sheepdog. You don't need to like you're. As long as you're choosing to go down there, that's the most important thing.
Winter.
Sorry. I know, because, when you live a life, there have been times in my life where I have been the lost sheep and have needed rescuing from that, and times when I have been with the with the flock, being the responsible 90 and 9, eating my grass, and trying to, trying to help the other people get back there. And moral decay, or the moral question is um, that not that the right is perfect or that the government is perfect in doing this, but the left sees no lines and will promote, especially damage to children, which is a line we used to respect. Make life changing permanent drugs or operations or things to children, that we won't allow them to get tattoos. Now it's like, hey, if the child wants to do that, we can't say no.
Yeah, it's really
we have lacked. They doubt themselves that they lack the moral authority to tell anybody, including a child who wants to take life-altering drugs or have life-altering surgeries.
Yeah, that's so weird.
No.
Like we don't let them smoke until they're 21 now, right? In this state, we don't let them, get drafted. We don't let them, get tattoos.
Guns,
we don't let them
go
all
to bars.
These things. It's like we don't let them engage in sexual relationships with older adults. We don't let them do blah 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 blah. But all of a sudden, we let them do this thing that, to my mind, feels more permanent and more impactful and usually I don't understand why we would be like, okay, that's no big deal.
Well, it's throwing out the years of common wisdom that we've learned, and this is the thing why the left, right, is always searching. Well, what's the new idea? What's the new thing? They just want to throw out hard-fought lessons that we've had to learn over time. Right, and the thing is, we reward precociousness in children and everything, right? You're smart and you're bright and you're picking up things faster than normally. We love that, but then we have to have the moral integrity to say no. But in these areas, you need to wait. You don't understand. The stakes are too high. The context matters too much. And you're just going to have to trust this. This is learned wisdom we learned. No, you're going to have to wait on this. But
slow down.
Right.
Slow down. Yeah, I made this an analogy ironically to I don't remember exactly what it was. It was similar to the shepherd analogy, to the sheep analogy. But my point was that, like in the progressives, the left often is just like trying to find new answers to new solutions to everything all the time, but a lot of times if they're in this corral, the conservatives are that fence, right? They found the zones that are dangerous, right? Not that it's always bad to go over, but it's like there's a reason that the fence is up, and a lot of times the progressives just like soar right past that out the gate, like not realizing the fence is there for a reason, right? And that isn't to say that we never leave, that we never think outside the box, that we never try to find new solutions, but it's like maybe every now and then stop and ask yourself, why is there a fence here? Just every now and then, just like, wow, somebody put up a brick wall to separate us from the zombie field. Like somebody put up a brick wall to separate us from the killer robots. Like, I don't know why they did that, but then they just run right out, get eaten by zombies. It's like there's a reason that there's fences, right? There's a reason that there's guardrails, and it's like you said, this is common wisdom, this hard-fought wisdom that we picked up over millennia.
Yeah.
And I mean, technology changes, times change, philosophies change, or added.
Hairstyles change.
But human interaction is basically the same throughout it's always been,
So one example too, right? The Soviets thought everything could be new. They were the ultimate leftists. And one of the big experiments they did about marriage was to de-emphasize it and to get away the sort of celebration of it. And one of the things is they made the place you got marriage licenses just like the dingiest building in the world, and not have it feel like walking into a big sort of courthouse or a big nice building. You got to the dumpiest building ever. And then they made it super easy to get a divorce. You could basically just write on a postcard, I want to get divorced, and mail it in, and boom, you're divorced. And they wanted, because they didn't want people to be more loyal to their families and their spouses than to the state. They thought that was a negative thing. So they basically tried to just treat marriage as almost like a pointless distinction between boyfriend and girlfriend. That
Was
the,
that
the
their?
breakups were well, and they found, you know, so Soviet communism lasted long enough that they had stats, and they just realized it was just disastrous, and they had to change, and they had to start promoting, you know, marriages and do propaganda to show that marriages were good things, and make it harder to get divorces. Right? Like you have like, all right, you want to get divorced, you got to be separated for 6 months, like we have here in the States. They have all these things to make it hard to get divorced. Is a way that the state says marriage is an important thing, and we don't want you to give up on it like that.
Right.
Because what the ones that have studied it and have learned from like the Soviets that tried to just show as marriage as something of no worth, how destabilizing it was to their society.
What do you think about? I heard this. I can't remember who said it. Maybe Charlie Kirk or somebody like that proposed getting rid of no-fault divorces, like, or at least making them much more difficult to attain. This is it. I don't remember exactly but he was basically saying there's all these people that get divorced and there's really no actual reason for it. Like their husband doesn't beat them. It's just like nothing's actually wrong. It's just it's just like the guy doesn't vacuum the house quite enough, or doesn't do the dishes enough, and then it's like, forget this, I'm out. Or
well, this is the moral of the cake, right? In past generations, even if the kids were out of the house, there were couples who would get his and her houses next to each other because he wanted to smoke and she didn't want him to smoke in the house. But they wouldn't think about getting divorced.
Right.
They might live a sort of, maybe separate
different
bedrooms or even
bedrooms.
separate houses next door to each other. But they're still married. Now it's like the slightest thing. Yeah.
I tried to do that.
So there's a.
It didn't work for some reason. She
rather
refused to accept.
Yeah.
That we could she was like, I don't want a roommate. I'm like, well, maybe for the kids, but
as a divorced man myself, there are a lot of legitimate reasons for divorce. I don't want to litigate that here now. But right. to be cavalier about divorce, or for the government to, in other ways, promote the idea that marriage is not a significant thing or something that you should put a lot of effort into, and that should be celebrated and supported by society, by your peers and stuff. That's why we have weddings and people give presents, is we want to support them and celebrate that. To do that is a moral decay, and will anyway.
Yeah.
That's one of the ideas, and one of the things that, not that the right is perfect on this, but in general, appreciates the value of families, wants to promote families above an alternative to the
above structures that aren't going to fit they're not going to replicate the rest of mankind. Mankind's going to just die out if you don't have.
And politically, the left, homosexual and LGBTQ has aligned themselves with the Democrat Party, so it makes sense politically for the left to oppose their political power, or for the right to oppose their political power. It's not seen as homophobic or wrong that they're protected class, but we're just opposed to their political power because their rates of voting for Democrats are so high.
Yeah, I guess. Again, I'm pretty libertarian when it comes to people's lifestyles, but it's like all of a sudden when it turns into when it gets to the point where one of the interesting aspects of this is the social contagion around transgenderism, and there's a lot of studies that show that the more exposure you have to transgenderism, the more transgender people there are in a given population. It's like I forget what it's called, rapid onset gender dysmorphia or whatever. Mm-hmm. But your gender dysphoria, sorry. And then you've got, if you've got the high suicidality that normally accompanies transgenderism, which I can only imagine is a very distressing condition, right? And then why would we want to expand that, right? Like, why would we want to turn what is normally like 0.8% of the population into like 5%, because then you've got that much more suicides over the. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like I don't know why you'd want to expand that. I'm not making any moral statement about the action itself,
Yeah.
even though I could, but even without that, like medically speaking, it seems bad to try to expand suicidality, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, you're right. It's because the adults in the room, right, which normally be the institutions, the judges, the legal system, the lawyers, or the journalists, the media, would say that there's a line. This is okay. This is unpermissible. Now, don't feel like they have any moral authority to put a line anywhere.
And there's no lines.
And that's what that relativism, that everything's relative. Everybody can have their own moral framework, is a very scary decline, and it leads to these type of outcomes where negative behavior is overrepresented. Right. And if anything, like as a strong society, we can handle some of this stuff. We can handle some people, men that wanted to be women, but we stigmatized it, right? And rightfully said that this should be rare and less often, and should be recognized as not normal. Right. This is not normal, and we're strong enough that we don't have to throw these people in prison, or anything worse than that. But we certainly don't want to recognize them as legitimate as others.
To that point, one of the things that I've noticed too is that there's such a struggle to have that quote unquote normalcy, right? Like it starts to struggle to be normal, and the truth is, it's really not that big of a deal to be abnormal, right? It's not that I've been abnormal my entire life. Right, but it's odd that they have these groups of people that are fighting for like media space just to be considered normal, when in reality these groups are like 2%, 3% of the population. There's nothing wrong with being 3% of a population, right? There's nothing wrong. That is an abnormality.
Yeah.
Not a bad one, not a good one. It's just an abnormality. Like if you're somebody who has like purple eyes, it's very rare, right? There's nothing wrong with having purple eyes, but you are not normal, right? The normal is the bulk, the mass, the predominance, right? Like that's what it means to be normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we've started to associate, I need to be normal to be okay. And it's weird that we've done that. I don't know why.
It's tied up with the history of the political power of the LGBTQ movement.
Yeah.
Right. So the LGBTQ movement used to be called the 10% Society.
Interesting.
Right. And this was a thing that they wanted to increase their political power
to 10%.
But 10%. But every time that they would actually count and do censuses, it would come up around 4%.
Right.
And in fact, like the people who said 10% Society are the very big LGBTQ organizations in like New York and San Francisco wanted to stop counting of their numbers because 2 to 4% was not going to get them the political power they wanted. They wanted, like the Bolsheviks, to say they were a majority to represent that they were higher percentage, because when they're 10%, then politicians have to give them more credence, because that's a large group. It's not just a big demographic, and why they want to expand their numbers is to expand their political power.
Sure.
And why they're drunk on their political power is so many people want to identify themselves with this movement, and they attach even different terms to what we would say, right? What was that Demi Lovato said that she was, she needed to be in a strong, loving relationship for her to feel sexual, and that's called
woman.
Demisexual. Now she can be part of the movement by just throwing a label on something. And
strong attraction to be.
and that she wasn't promiscuous, that she needed to excuse that. When we would say, no, that's appropriate moral, that you should want to be with one person, that you have a strong commitment, and you're in a loving relationship, and want to be in a stable relationship with that. You don't need to excuse yourself for that.
Right.
But
moreover, that's like the description of needing to feel a strong attraction to somebody, and a strong social attention. That's just to me, that's what I would describe as every woman I've ever met, right? Like, you don't even have to. Why come up with a new word for what is?
Well, yeah, big.
Yeah, I guess because right.
The movement and the pride has really wanted to do this, and so I think that there are lines that we need to, as a society, redraw. Obviously, I draw my lines from my religious context as well as from my life experience, from mistakes as well as achievements that I made, and in general, things that I think will make it, neighborhoods and societies, towns, better places to live in if we uphold those as norms and stigmatized or at least delegitimized, even if it's not in a government way.
Sure.
So that activity, non-standard activity, would just happen less, and that we can handle it, but we don't need to promote it.
Sure.
But that's very, very controversial. They might say that that's, very right wing, but I think for ultimately, when I think about the good old days, I think about a time when we could draw lines, and that we could be honest with our fellow men. And I think the only way we can get back to that and not just be trying to scam and trying to get one over on somebody is to, again, have a public idea of a morality and what it means to uphold, those things as a collective.
Right, an objective morality, something that everybody else is bound to, even if it doesn't fit there.
And somebody will recognize is crossing the line.
Right.
When they cross the line.
And I mean, if people don't realize that if you start removing all the lines, then there isn't anyone to keep someone from stealing. There isn't anyone to keep someone from killing. There isn't anyone to keep someone from all these things go. All these crimes go away, because if there's really nothing evil about raping, if there's nothing evil about hurting or torturing, if there's nothing evil about these things, then you also lose the moral imperative to prevent it.
Well, if you're sociopathic, there's some Louis C.K. had a big thing about that. It says he doesn't murder people because he's been told not to, and that if people didn't tell him not to, he might have, or he doesn't rape, or he doesn't stuff like that. He's just going along with what he's been told. But I think that there is still a light in us that helps us know good from right from wrong and good from evil, and it is rare to find people that we really would, act out. It's the young whose their sense of their morality is still not formed yet, that have a sense of they're very sociopathic. They don't appreciate or they struggle to empathize with other people, and so they're more willing to just think selfishly.
Or they philosophically talk themselves out of it. Like that. Like I said, that moral relativism is a big group now. That's literally like I said, they may live a different lifestyle, but one that's relatively like inside the herd, and yet they've talked themselves out of it so long that it's gotten to the point where they no longer believe in the lines themselves, even though they maybe have always lived by them. I mean, I've talked at length with people that have just they talk to themselves in circles. Like literally, they're like, well, there's no objective morality, and so if there's no more objective morality, I'm like, well, don't you feel it's wrong to kidnap a baby and blah blah blah? And they're like, and I'm like, really? Like we're having trouble with this one, and it's weird because they would never do it. They would tell people not to do it. They would probably even stop someone from doing it. But I'm like sitting there talking to them, act in their face. I'm like, is it wrong to do this? And they're like, well, it depends on what you mean by wrong. And I'm like,
why do hospitals stop people from just going in and taking babies out of the nursery there if you feel like you want one?
I mean, maybe you're just better with babies than the mother. You never know.
Yeah, I just want one for the day.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, those are probably conversations for
Sure.
But so there are some thoughts about right and wrong, and we have there. But maybe some of your comments will elicit it.
Yeah.
But
And
again,
guys, by the way, I definitely read those and I definitely respond to them. I like getting the conversation going, so that's actually one of the main reasons I'm here. So definitely write me something, tell me what you think. And we'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.